Good morning, everybody. I am Mike with Obviously Outdoorsmen. Welcome to FLT number 16, First Light Talk number 16. I am Mike with Obviously Outdoorsmen. I hope you guys are having a good Saturday waking up this morning. I tell you what, I'm staring at a 9-inch Osprey line through swim bait I have sitting on my desk, and it just makes me want to go fishing on the Saturday morning, but I do have work today. But if you guys are new to the First Light Talk, I start with a current news article, and today's article is Pennsylvania's bow hunter harvests potential Boone Crockett buck on public land. All right, this hunter, Dwayne Crow, tagged a 170-inch 12-pointer in the last few days of Pennsylvania's bow season, and I just love a good hunting story, so I'm going to read this one off. All right, so what Boone and Crockett basically is, it's a prestigious record book for the hunting community. There's Pope and Young, and there's Boone and Crockett for deer, and it's based on the total amount of inches of antler a deer has. For Pope and Young, they have to be at least a 125-inch rack, and a Boone and Crockett needs to be a 170-inch rack to make it in the books. Dwayne didn't have much time at all this year to hunt with all the COVID infections and with a busy work schedule, so he finally got out with 10 days left of his bow season. All right, this is after rifle took place, and this is after the gun season, so he got out there with 10 days left of the bow season and just the entire season wrapping up. So he took this buck on a WMA, or a wildlife management area, in Schuylkill County that gets hammered with pressure through the season. And this is just a little past Harrisburg if you guys are familiar with PA. And this property gets hammered with hunting pressure throughout the season. But he figured a frigid late season morning called for less pressure. So he was spot and stalking, and basically that means he's not in a set position, he's not in a stand, or he's not in a blind location. He's basically just moving slow through the woods trying to spot the animal before the animal spots him. So he was spot and stalking on a snowy day, and after finding fresh beds and a good trail, he set up by a large tree near the trail. And he saw a massive rack moving through the bush, and he worked its way to 20 yards, and Dwayne let an arrow fly. This buck had 12 points, a 17-inch spread, and a green gross score of 174 inches. So he's already in the Pope and Young record books for this one. And after there's a drying process for the antlers, because the antlers normally will shrink like a quarter inch or a half inch depending on every situation. But he should, after the drying process, also have this buck in the Boone and Crockett record. And if you get a Boone and Crockett buck, that is just like a lifelong goal for everyone, and it's just an absolute giant deer. So I love to hear a great hunting story, especially with the bow and on public land, and it's a trophy of a deer. Congrats, Dwayne, and everyone out there that's still hunting. It's only January 22nd, so depending what state you're in, you still got like a couple weeks left to go. Especially in Jersey, in certain zones, you can hunt till the second week of February. So if you guys are out there and you still got bucks with headgear that haven't shed yet, get out there and try and make last-minute magic happen and send an arrow through a big buck, or just get some meat on the ground. Good luck to all the hunters out there. And on to today's topic: why having short-term memory, it's good for fishing. All right, why living in the moment is good for fishing. And take the title with a grain of salt, because logging every single fishing trip in your memory bank, or your mind, is good to make you a well-rounded fisherman and to gain a ton of experience. But the title is what it is because it basically means fish every time by what the current conditions are, not your past experiences. Don't go out there with the mindset of, I did good on this point, or off this rock or dock, or with this bait in this location on this kind of day. All right, you want to read the current conditions and throw what you know should work. And if all else fails, have your memory and past experiences as a fallback. It's a backup plan. Fishing experiences may work on some trips, but there will be multiple times where you go out and that worked last trip, but it won't work this time. So fish the current conditions and use your knowledge. So for example, I'm going to run you through like a bunch of scenarios. All right, to start, like in your mind, it's the fall, the weather's been cool, and the weather's been a consistent temperature, spotty clouds, you're bass fishing on a lake, and automatically in your head, your wheels should start turning before you even get out there. The bite's on, and match your baits to their forage, color wise. You should already know what baits you should be throwing just by walking out your front door in the morning. But bait selection should be very easy in this scenario. So if you're talking about fall weather, it's the northern part of the country, northeastern part of the country, then in the fall, you know they're feeding up to trying to get fat. The weather's been consistent, so they're very patternable. So you should be going out there with a jig, a spinnerbait, a chatterbait, any type of moving bait, whether it be a crankbait, whatever it is, try and match the forage. So if you're going to a lake and you know they got shiners and they're primarily feeding on crawfish, then you should be throwing some type of crankbait or spinnerbait that matches the bait fish in there, or you should be throwing a jig that matches the color of the crawfish in the lake at that time. Or whatever they're feeding on, you just want to match the forage. Now let's take the same situation, but only change a random temperature change. So everything else is the same. So you got spotty clouds and you're bass fishing a lake and the weather's been cool, but now it's ice cold. So it goes from like a steady 50 down to like a random 20 degrees day. It's just icicles. You go out there, the bite's going to be tough. You're going to have to slow down and it's going to be a grind to get these fish to bite. Now, if you get them to bite on this cold day, then you know already that it's probably going to be a big fish. Especially if it starts getting later in the fall, you start throwing like bigger swim baits. You slow down your presentation, throwing like a drop shot or crawling a jig, hopping a jig across the bottom. And in the northern part, well, basically everywhere but like Florida and the hot states, so like Texas and Florida, if it's a steady consistent temperature, then it's going to be easy to catch the fish. The fish are going to be biting. But in Florida, compared to like the northern part of the country, if you get a cold front down in Florida or Texas, the bite shuts down completely. And depending on how severe the cold front is, I'm talking like, all right, so like right now in Florida, it gets down to like, depending on the day, it could get down to like 40, 50 degrees at night and then jump up to 70, 80, 90 degrees during the day. But if you get like a random 30-degree night and it stays like 50 degrees throughout the day, that's a pretty severe cold front that where the bite's basically going to be super, super tough in Florida or Texas. It's just going to be cold for these bass. They're used to like tropical weather, and when they get a cold front that's like normal for New York, PA, then it's going to shut them down. It's going to shock their whole system down here in Florida. So you have to change your mindset based on where you are, do a lot of research, and a lot of that experience or a lot of that knowledge comes from experience. But you should have a general mindset of what you're going to throw and what works on that lake, and then just read the conditions. So if you roll up on a normal day, everything's the same except it's super windy that day, you want to roll up on the windblown points, the windblown coves or banks, or the eddies that are just getting hammered with bait across the lake into a little spot, and that's where all the fish are going to be. And you know it's windy, wind calls for moving baits right away. And for me, when it's windy, I throw a spinnerbait right off the rip, and I'm working the spinnerbait all the way down. And then I'll be fishing the backside of cover. So if I got a down tree, I'll fish the backside of that if it's windy with like a jig, or work a spinnerbait back there first. And I'll start with a spinnerbait, work everything, and then I'll switch to a jig and work everything back to where I just already hit. If I don't get a bite, I'll change baits up. Now, take a different scenario. It's the summertime, and it's been partly cloudy. It hasn't been too hot. It's been like 80 degrees. Let's say we're back in the northern part of the country, and it's been decently hot. It's been comfortable, 70 degrees, like for 3 days in a row, and then it goes bam, overnight, it gets cold down to like 40, 50 degrees. And then in the morning, it starts getting back up into like 60, 70s. And you got a cold front to just move through. Bluebird day, not a cloud in the sky. And it's a chilly morning. Your cold front pressure system just moved through. And it's going to be a hard bluebird bass fishing day. That's just how it's going to be. So you're going to have to go out there, slow down your presentations, go deep, go off them offshore banks, and you're going to have to slow down and cause a reaction strike or just finesse them and force feeding them at that point. And another situation, you're down here in Florida, and if it's anything in Florida and it's consistent weather and it's not like super cold, then bass are going to bite. But let's take like a trout fishing example. So you're up in, let's say, New York, PA, and you're fishing for, let's say, steelhead. And you go out there and it hasn't rained for like a month or two. The water level's lower, so you start fishing the deeper holes and you start fishing the pockets. The river's not moving as quick. You know you can go up there and just work the same spots that is the deeper water, and you're going to have a good time working the normal baits that are working, depending on how early it is during the, let's say, the salmon run, or if it starts getting later in the season and it's really steelhead time and they're picking up all the last pickings of the salmon eggs out there and they're really feeding. You go out there and have a great time. But let's say you're not watching like the water pressure and how high the river is, and it rains for like 3 days straight heavy. You go out there, the water of the river just raised up by like 2,000 and you can't even cross the river. You should just stay home at that point. You should know some days are better than others. But being versatile is one of the most key things while fishing. You go out there and there's a weather change while you're out there. You have to be conscious in your mind to just put a rod down that is your favorite bait. So like for me, throwing a jig, flipping and pitching, it's my favorite thing to do when I'm bass fishing. And if I'm out there and I just know that, let's say it's been calm all morning and I'm throwing top water and then the sun starts getting up, well, first off, I got to put that top water down and start picking up a moving bait or a jig or a finesse bait, and I should start flipping and pitching, or I should start going deep depending on the time of year. Just basically in your mind, you have to make quick decisions on putting a rod down and picking up a certain bait in order to be successful. And my mindset on this is all like bass tournament fishing. I did a couple bass tournaments and I did win a couple, so I would love to do bass fishing competitively for a living, but right now we're doing this. So, and just my mindset is like a bass tournament angler. So basically, catch the most amount of fish in a short period of time, and you have to do it quickly. And any time you're casting and you're throwing the wrong bait and you're not maximizing your opportunities, then you're almost wasting time. So in your head, to have the best day of fishing that you could possibly have, you have to be conscious of when to put a bait and a rod down and pick up a different bait. That's just how it's going to be. And this is any type of fishing that you pick, whether it's bass, smallmouth bass, you got hybrids, you got trout, you got pike, you got muskie, you got perch, crappie, yeah, and pick a species, and there's probably a better bait that you could be throwing if you're not doing good. If it's a slower bite and it's been consistent weather, then there's probably something better that you could be throwing if you're not catching a lot of fish. There should be a pretty good pattern if the weather's been consistent and there's nothing drastic in changes. If something changed, like steady weather and then a cold front or a random windy day or a rainstorm or a hurricane or snow, then there's probably going to be a cold front and the fishing is going to naturally be tough. So you're probably going to catch lesser amount of fish. So just have a versatile mindset on being able just to change up in a split second and put a rod down and pick up a different rod and just go out there and try and catch the most amount of fish you possibly could catch. And why I said fish in the moment, you should have all of your experiences in your head. So if you go out there and you're doing what should work, you're reading the water, you're reading the weather, and you're going out there and you've grinded for like 5 hours. You've grinded all morning and you've got 1 or 2 fish or you got no fish at all. Then if you have a fallback plan on your experiences on that lake or river or wherever you are, and you go there and you're like, I've done very well here on this kind of bait at this time of year, last year or the year before, or even 10 years ago. Just have it in your mindset like, okay, they like sitting off this point. There's good humps down here. There's good submerged cover way down deep. And if I work, let's say, a deep diving crankbait over all this submerged bush at this time of year, then I've done very well here. And obviously, take the title with a grain of salt, having short-term memory, because sometimes if it's the same exact weather patterns and temperature and everything lines up as the same as you've done in the past, and you start on that and you start hammering them off the rip, sometimes then that is the key. Having a short-term memory in this aspect, if you roll up on them submerged humps and bushes and everything, all that pile down deep, and you start throwing what used to work, and you're not catching a single fish for like a half hour, have it in your mindset to put that rod down and either work that same area with a different bait, whether it be a drop shot, a Carolina rig, a swim bait down deep, just crawling it around that cover, just trying something different down there may be the ticket. So in your head, you're used to like a 10XD going across all that submerged bush and pile down there, and you're not getting bit. Pick up a different bait, whether it be a spinner bait, a little swim bait like a Kayatek, or just hopping a jig down on the bottom. Just be able to stop fishing a bait when there is no bite or it's a very slow bite. It could make the world of a difference just putting down one and picking up the other. And this is the same thing in hunting, to where if something's not working, and just be able to, on the limb, just go out there and randomly do something different, and you could have a deer down or a bear down or just the biggest buck of your life down, instead of sitting in a stand all day long on a super windy day and it's sketchy up in that tree stand. Have a short-term memory to where, okay, I'm not just sitting in the stand all day long. All right, I'm going to get down and I'm going to do some spot and stalking, and I'm going to get out there. And this is where I also comes into play to having a short-term memory, to where don't have one in this case, get down and say, okay, I know they like bedding over here, the wind's going this way. This is where you use your memory bank to where you're not sitting your stand this time, in which you have done all season long. Get down and try and be stealthy. Move with the wind. If the wind dies, you stop moving and do more looking than moving. The wind picks up, you start creeping. Try and get your eyes on the deer before they see you. The wind picks up, you start moving. The wind dies, you stop moving, especially if it's a rainy day. Mixed with a lot of wind, it could be the best hunting day that you have, to where you're just sneaking up on a bunch of deer and their senses are all dulled because of the heavy winds. They can't hear you. And if it's rain, there was previous rain, then they can't hear you because you're super stealthy. So just move slow in the woods, and it's like the same exact thing. But just be able to put a bait down and pick up a different bait when the fishing isn't working. And especially spots. If you're fishing a spot that, like, let's say you have a lake that you always hit up. You always hit up your favorite lake. And you're going out there, and for some reason you're like, I'm going to try this other lake today. The neighbor lake, the sister lake to that lake across the road that you really never fish. And you're going out there and you're grinding on the lake. You're grinding on the lake on a consistent weather day. And you're on that sister lake and you ain't catching anything. All right? Have the balls to just say, okay, I failed on this lake today after a couple hours. Again, give it a chance. Try and figure out the bite. And just have the balls to just say, okay, I didn't do anything. I didn't catch any fish. I didn't figure it out. I'm going to go across the street and just hammer them. And if you go across the street and you start hammering them on like stuff that should be working, then maybe that other lake is just crap. There's too much pressure. Maybe something's wrong with the lake. Maybe some pollution, or there's too many predators eating all the fish or birds. You just don't know the situation. And if you work that other lake for like 4 or 5 hours on consistent weather patterns to where they should be somewhere, and you don't catch anything, maybe that lake is just messed up. Because if you go across the road and you start hammering them, it probably wasn't you, and it was probably that lake. It was all messed up. But if something's just a hard fishing day, sit there and try and figure it out, because I guarantee you there's probably going to be fish in there, and you just haven't figured out the bite. There's a lot of times when I go out there with Rob, and it could be either one of us having a bad day, and the other person is just killing it. They are annihilating it. Me and Rob have swapped roles in this one, to where I'll be killing it, and then he's doing not so good, to where, like, let's say we're out there for like a 10-hour day. When we fish in the morning, all the way through lunchtime, and then all the way into the afternoon till dark. There's many times where I go out there in the morning throwing what I like to throw, and I hammer them throughout the morning hours up till lunchtime, and then Rob's not catching a thing, and then it switches into the afternoon bite, and Rob catches on, and I start catching nothing, and he starts catching everything, or vice versa. So there's many times it's like that, and really, when we're going out there on our favorite lake, and I'm throwing what I know works, because I fished this same lake 40 times this year already with him, and we know what should be working, and we've been throwing what we've been throwing the past previous 40 times, and maybe I'm just throwing a spinnerbait and he's throwing a jig, and the spinnerbait's just cracking him, but he likes throwing the jig. Put the jig down and pick up a spinnerbait. There's so many times where just having multiple people will help you in this situation, because it cuts down the learning curve of that day. You guys are learning what biting. This is the same thing with ice fishing. This is why, if I have multiple people and everyone's willing, then I will put everyone on a different lure with a different color, just trying to figure out what's working. And then as soon as something starts working, maybe half the people switch up and see if it's a pattern and not just a fluke bite that I'm getting. It's just utilizing every tool to your advantage. If you have multiple people, try using different things, see what's working. That's why so many times people are out on a lake with like multiple boats, with like a group of people, and someone will be doing good in this area off this point with this bait, and then just look at past tournaments in general. Look at why so many people do very, very well in like the MLF style tournaments and the quick tournaments on one time, and then the people that only work jigs the other times, they do good sometimes, but it's not a consistent bite. If it's like a big reservoir and it's a breeze driven reservoir, it's always someone like KVD out there, and he's throwing like a jerk bait or a crankbait, and he's just smacking all the fish on a windy day. But as soon as it gets to like a hotter and a slower type of fishing, someone like Greg Hackney flipping a jig is going to do better than KVD that day. So that's why, if you just got to be versatile, put your bait down, pick up the other bait on what you're used to fishing, and it's probably going to switch your day. So instead of this being repetitive and me just saying be versatile and have short-term memory about 1,000 times, I'm going to wrap this up today. This is going to be a shorter, quicker first light talk. If you guys are out there, depending where you are in the country, north, south, I think the bass just got done spawning down here in Florida. I know a lot of offshore saltwater fishing's been doing really good. If you're up in Jersey, it's hard ice, depending where you are. And good luck out there. Don't fall through the ice. Start pulling up them perch, them trout, them landlocked salmon, wherever you may be. Good luck. And if you're still hunting, stay safe, stay warm, and make the shot count. I am Mike. We're obviously Outdoorsmen. Thank you for listening to First Light Talk number 16. It's time to go eat breakfast and then go head to work. And have a great day, guys. I'm Mike. Peace. Let's get it on.